Well, 'tis the season, friends. As I anticipate the family dynamics across this season, it does make me just a little bit jealous of the holly and the oak king. If only we could all rely on a change of seasons and a little underworld to solve some tricky family dynamics. I know I'm not alone, and I won't ask for confirmation, but someone out there was thinking the same thing this morning, yes? In all sincerity, there is some wisdom in that old tale that recognizes this essential push-tug between the tensions of the day and night, what could be called the battle between coldness and warmth, light and darkness, and what some have called even good and evil. What I love, though, about these old tales is that the battle is not about who will win, or in some way equating darkness with evil like so many of our contemporary theologies can. Instead, the earth-based traditions seek out balance, a recognition of the cycle of things. It's the cause of the struggle, not its resolution, that the story seeks to explain. And when you think about it, that's sort of a remarkable way of engaging the world. The late Unitarian Universalist minister A. Powell Davies, who served this congregation, lifts this up when he writes, "Whenever we feel pessimistic concerning the future of humanity upon this troubled planet, we can always remember this, that with all his fears and failings, man has yet somehow managed to put the brightest of his festivals in the darkest part of the year. Not at midsummer, but at midwinter, he celebrates most universally hope and joy." The hardihood of this festival, continuing as it has through many thousands of years and rising stage by stage from frenzy to pagan jubilation and finally to the symbolism of Christian observance, gives us true cause for confidence and reassurance. When it is darkest, man celebrates the light. When the earth is most desolate, he carols his joy. And when the harshest and bleakest of seasons is upon him, he can turn to gentleness, kindness, and forbearance. His courage can rise superior to circumstance. And this truly is to be remarked. Considering the earliest days of the Northern Hemisphere, when light was livelihood, and the turn toward winter meant a time of scarcity and worry of death, it was in this context that ancient peoples, without the knowledge we have today, calculated the shortest day, and on that day, with wholly insufficient evidence, began to build rituals to welcome back the light. With certitude, they celebrated the solstice, which from the Latin translates as sun stopping. That moment when the shortest day, the sun stopped, they heralded its return. The song we just sang, "Ring Out Wild Bells," is adapted from a poem written by Alfred Lord Tennyson in the 19th century. It's become a traditional reading given at New Year's. Tennyson wrote it as part of a larger memorial, really, to his sister's fiancé, who died suddenly at the age of 22. Trying to make sense of his grief in the midst of the holiday season and welcoming a new year, Tennyson wrote these words, "Ring out, wild bells, to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light, the year is dying in the night. Ring out, wild bells, and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true." His original words, you'll notice, are different than the ones we just sang by one word. He has the word him instead of it, which could be read as the personification of the year, but Tennyson, of course, meant it to be a play on words interpreted as the year or his sister's fiancé. He penned the words to this poem, it is said, while listening to the bells ring out in England for the new year, a long tradition in Waltham Abbey in the Abbey Church. The year is going, he wrote. Let him go. Courage, rising superior to his circumstances. On winter solstice this year, I got home in the dark, feeling embattled. I had NPR on for the ride home, and the news of the day was swirling all about. The government shutdown, the border wall, the markets, and the general dis-ease in our country. With Christmas Eve nearly upon us and managing all the personal travels and service details, I was feeling, to be honest, just incredibly anxious. Has anyone else felt maybe a little anxious in the last week or two? At such a time, it seems most natural to just press on and kind of increase the frenzy when you're in that state of anxiety. I had completely forgotten that it was solstice until I accidentally, in trying to switch the channel, pressed play on my CD player in the car. I had Peter Mayer's CD, and Green started to play, the song that we sang at the beginning of the service. I parked in my driveway and turned off the headlights and just sat in my car. I turned down the music and I looked up to the stars. I could see my wife with our baby walking in the living room. And I stepped out into the darkness of the night, as dark as it gets on a hill in West Orange outside New York City, but there it was. I turned around to watch my neighbor's blow-up Snoopy kind of waving at me. I tried to figure out if he was mocking me or generally greeting. The poet Pablo Neruda reminds us, if we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once we could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. For this too is true, I thought. And in that silence, and in that sort of darkness, I remembered it was solstice. And I remembered the light. The light this year came from me in the name of a man, Jorge Chahon. Some of you may know his story. Jorge's been in detention in New Jersey for 18 months. A father of two to a toddler and a baby that he could not welcome into this world in that baby's first few months. Jorge was brought to detention because essentially of an omission and paperwork error made by someone submitting paperwork on his behalf. He stayed in detention for so long because ICE continued to fail to bring him to each hearing that he had scheduled with a federal judge. His story is one of injustice and arbitrariness and complete ineptitude of our current immigration policy and systems. Beacon member Kristen Peck companioned Jorge through much of his journey and advocated for him tirelessly, including working with our own UU Faith Action to hold a rally outside of his most recent hearing to ensure that ICE actually produced Jorge at last for his hearing before a judge. It's been back and forth on whether or not the government would potentially try to appeal the decision to release Jorge. And so we've all been waiting for the news of what would happen. And then on Wednesday, we received word suddenly that Jorge would be released. Kristen was there outside the detention center with Jorge's wife and 2 children as they waited for him. And I want to show you a little video. Remember, beloved, it is faithful to lament injustice and to grieve what is lost, but it is also faithful to bear witness to joy and to affirm the return of the light, most especially on the shortest day. Not some epic battle fought once and for all, but the spiritual truth passed across the ages. The light will return. And not by our force alone as individuals, but by a collective energy larger than any one of us could possibly control. And we, the inheritors of this truth, are called to act and to live toward its return. But also we are told to pause and to remind our bodies and beings to live into it, even here in this sanctuary. We say yes to the life that is. We welcome in the new, and in the darkest night, we ring out false pride and place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. We ring in the love of truth and light. We ring in the common love of good. We remember in the words of the poet Jan Richardson, this is the night when you can trust that any direction you go, you will be walking toward dawn. And so we rise, courageous beyond our circumstance. Hail and bid welcome the light. We're going to share now in a ritual of this community. We're going to invite you to receive a gift of rosemary. Rosemary is an evergreen that's used in food and has healing properties. It's one that you can find